Well then, the first devserver for update Wind of Change is open this weekend, and well, the update name is somewhat appropriate to naval. But we'll get to that later. First off, what are the new vessels? I'll go over them somewhat differently than usual, but it will be obvious why. I'll go from small to big, and so we'll start with the Kim Kui. It's not really too special, being a rank 3 gunboat with a single 40mm gun at the front, and two dual 20s closer to the rear, and a pair of single 50 cals on the sides. It is armed to the teeth, but at a BR of 3.3 it's not exactly game-breaking. The slow top speed is also quite a negative factor. A similar vessel to Kim Kui, the former Flussi 1, now Christian der Grosse, sits at a BR of 2.7, so it could be possible that Kim Kui's BR will be lowered, which would certainly make it more viable, but at 3.3 it should still be alright, but probably not at its best. The next vessel would be the Italian Albatross, sitting at rank 5 next to Saeta. It looks to be a promising coastal vessel, being armed with two early versions of the automatic 76s, as well as a dual L-70 Bofors 40mm mount. Good armament, though lacking in some crucial shell types. It doesn't get any kind of armor-piercing shells for the main guns, nor a variable time or time fuse belt for the anti-air guns. Though that shouldn't matter too much, as it seems to have a coastal spawn, with a complex damage model. Even at 3.7, if it retains the coastal spawn, it should be a pretty fun vessel with a decent RP cost of 220,000. It shouldn't be too difficult to get, making it a fine addition to the already decent Italian coastal tree. Then another step up in size, we have Karl Marx, a PR-50 frigate that should already be familiar to you if you've gone down the Russian coastal tree. With identical torpedoes and rockets to the premium Rosamacha, but lacking the dual 25s. Thus having the same gun armament as the Yacht. Karl Marx is a squadron vehicle, but I wouldn't recommend getting it really. 4.3 for a frigate is a rather hostile battle rating. And for the love of God, don't pay golden eagles for this thing. It's most certainly not worth that. Then we finally step into the Blue Water Fleet. With a premium. HMS Valhalla. An earlier fit of the V-class destroyer like Vega or Verdun, it is quite different from these two really, as you can probably tell. The gun armament is perhaps standard for a 3.3. The anti-air armament is non-existent however, with only a single 76mm gun with self-destroying shrapnel rounds. The torpedoes are also not the greatest, so it looks like a rather mediocre 3.3 destroyer. But that's also part of the allure of it, as it will be the only 3.3 destroyer the British have, since HMS Churchill and Montgomery are no longer available to new players. The price of 550 golden eagles though seems like a bit of a rip-off, seeing as premium counterparts to reserve destroyers are only 250 golden eagles by default. And then there's the big ones. First let's take a look at Arizona. At long last a US battleship with 14-inch guns. But what is she like when we look closer? Well, it's complicated. First off, for both Arizona and the other battleship I'll be talking about later, it seems that the shells are incorrect, so I can't really say much on that front. Alright, what's the armor like? Well, that's also complicated, but I can tell you that the main belt is 343mm of rolled cemented armor. So, quite tough, really. But there's nothing else behind this belt to offer additional protection. And again, there's something about battleship armor that I'll discuss later. Okay, the gun armament of Arizona, what about that? For anti-air, the 50 cals and the 5-inch guns are surprisingly decent, with the 5-inch guns having stock high explosive time fuse rounds. They're not perfect, but again, they're pretty decent. The casemate 5-inch guns are alright secondaries for when a sudden coastal vessel pops up, and the main guns, however, are, well, rather underwhelming. Not because of their number or shell potency, but the reload rate is atrocious, varying between 66 and 50 seconds. Depending on your crew skill, of course. And that's not taking into account damage to elevators or running multiple repairs. Now, it is the dev server, but I don't expect these values to improve too much, from what I've heard. The mobility doesn't look particularly stunning either, but it's alright by American battleship standards. Overall, I'm actually looking forward to getting Arizona myself, but that reload is definitely a bit of a damper. Then there's the last devserver edition and probably the first ship I'm going to get myself when the update goes live. IGN Congo in her 1944 refit. a battlecruiser that received the Scharnhorst treatment when it comes to her placement in the tech tree, having Akoma split off her line and making her own line, with Congo coming after it. Congo carries the same guns as on Hyuga, but should have different shells, mainly no longer having a semi-armor piercing shell, but a high explosive shell instead. So, alright firepower for sure. The protection on the other hand is a bit lesser, with at most 203mm of armor plating, which isn't really great. So surely its mobility must be great, right? Well, it isn't Scharnhorst levels of speed, but it is between 48 and 54 km an hour. The main attraction is the anti-air really, with 6 dual 127mm mounts, 3 on either side, and a total of 100 25mm guns. Now, I'll be honest, Japanese anti-air is far from the best, but this kind of protection will be of use to Congo. Congo also sits at 6.3, which is rather odd to me, as that's the same BR as Setsu. But if Scharnhorst can be a 6.3, I'm no longer surprised, really. So now, the less noticeable but very important changes. First, armor plating for battleships, or the reason why talking about battleship survivability is now kind of complicated. All battleships and battlecruisers, which I'll just call capital ships for the ease of it, have armor plates modeled as destructible modules. What does this mean? Well, it's not exactly clear, but armor plates can be destroyed when enough kinetic force is inflicted on them. From the wording of the change in the changelog, it seems that this makes the armor plate severely less effective, but not non-existent. I'd imagine it would maybe be something along the lines of a 300mm thick plate becoming as effective as a 50mm thick plate. But here also lies the problem and confusion. They don't give us values, so we don't know how much the effectiveness of an armor plate is reduced. The example I gave is to just try and explain it from my own understanding. So before you start to panic, understand that it isn't the case that the armor value is just reduced to 0, it's just reduced to a far lesser, but for now unknown, value. What effect this will have on capital ship gameplay I cannot judge from the Embassy dev server battles, but it does seem like it will give cruisers a bit more of a fighting chance, while also forcing capital ship captains to be a bit more careful about their positioning. Then there's also the change to crew distribution, which changed so that the crew compartments closer to the bridge of the ship hold more crew than compartments closer to the extremities of the ship. I don't quite know which ships this influences, as the changelog just states bigger ships, which could mean every ship of the complex damage model, but I don't know. I can't properly test what this does compared to the current live server model. If this is a good or bad change, I just can't tell yet. Then there's also the universal change to shell dispersion. Dispersion is becoming tighter, meaning that long-range shell fire is a bit more useful and effective. It should also greatly help ships that are notorious for their incredibly inaccurate guns like Kako or Kafka's. I think that this is a good change, but at the same time, a bit of a spread is useful for hitting a larger area of your target. But again, this can only be really properly tested in actual matches, and not really on the dev server. And there's more. There's a change to flooding damage, where the sealing of any hole in the hull now takes longer, but pumping out the water is reduced in time. Now this is actually quite an important change, as pumping out water used to be something that could be done automatically after the hull was sealed. And this usually also took longer than sealing the hull, meaning you could cancel the repair to reduce the penalty it had on other repairs. But now that the time division for this repair function is switched, flooding damage won't be something that you can just put off until fires are put out. So keep a close eye on it on the future. And there's even more. This time a very good change though, I think. All allies are now capable of assisting with repairs in naval, and even better, it'll be done automatically when an ally requests for help or starts a repair and another ally is close enough to help. So you no longer have to hold down the button to help repair your ally. This doesn't affect naval only, but it is quite a nice expansion of the help with repairing mechanic. Let me see, is there anything else major? No, not by the looks of it. So now I'll do a bit of a rapid fire for the smaller changes. Akebono and Ikazuchi now have fire control systems, the lead indicator stuff in case you forgot what that meant. The cruisers Eugenio di Savoia and Courage have received search radar. These shells got reclassified. Positions of plotting rooms on these ships have been corrected. Positions of modules and armor on the SGBs have been corrected. Size of fuel tanks on the T-31 and T-22 destroyers have been corrected. Position of main ammo storage has been corrected on these ships. Armoring has been adjusted on these ships. In general, these seem to be like corrections and more detailed armor schemes. Nothing too influential at a first glance. USS Raleigh had its AA armament changed to reflect its 1942 refit. Flag animations have been corrected on these ships. Okay, I think that's all of the changes on the changelog itself. To finish this video up, there are some things that were not present on the dev server but have been data mined. First off is the PR12412P. I don't really know what the major difference in performance is between this and the already existing tech tree ship, but it's in the files, so who knows what will happen to it. Then there are also rumors floating around about a Des Moines class heavy cruiser coming to the US 3-2 this update, which if that is the case would be awesome for the US 3, but these are just rumors, so don't place your bets on it. And that's it I think for the first dev server. I'm personally very curious to see how the damage model changes are going to affect battleship gameplay, but I'm not looking at it as pessimistically as some other people I've seen. So goodbye for now, and may your seas be calm.